Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Piercing Wizard podcast. My name is Ryan Willett. I pierce at Precision Body Arts in Nashua, New Hampshire. On the Skype call with me today, I have Jeff Saunders. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Jeff.
Hey, everyone. My name's Jeff Saunders. I am formerly from Rockstar Body Piercing in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm currently wandering the globe piercing, and I teach for the Fakir Intensives and provide piercing education. I also run a blog called Confessions of a Piercing Nerd, which you can go to at www.piercingnerd.com.
All right, so today what I wanted to talk about is a subject that Charlie LeBeau from the UK brought up, and that's negativity in professional Facebook groups. So for the people listening, you know, whether you're a piercer or not, I'm sure you're aware that there are a lot of different forums and different groups that you can be part of on Facebook. And just like any industry, the body piercing industry has quite a few of them. What I tend to see is that conversations might start off well-natured, but then they can start to get a little bit spiteful. And I don't know how you feel about it, Jeff, but I really don't like to see piercers shaming anyone else who are just generally there trying to learn. I don't really feel like it does anyone a service by saying, yeah, I know you're here for feedback or you want some criticism, and I'm just going to kind of rip into you for all the things that, you know, the mistakes that I might have made myself a few years ago. I don't really feel like it's a beneficial way to grow the industry. So what are some of your thoughts on, like, the Facebook groups?
Well, by and large, the Facebook groups are awesome. It's really wonderful to have professionals get together and share ideas. And there are times where that devolves into certain, negativity, but also ad hominem attacks and stuff like that. For me, one of the things that people need to understand is that the way that you speak on the internet usually needs to be considered like how someone might be perceiving that on the other end of the tubes, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have to baby everyone all the way through things, but you do have to consider how might this tone be read. And I'm not always the best at it, but I really try to consider that before I hit send.
Well, yeah, I mean, internet muscles is definitely a term that I've heard come out of things like this, where, you know, somebody might they might have a great personality in person. You know, they might be really forthcoming with information and they might really like to share, but sometimes online they can almost, you know, it turns into more of like a high school clique in some situations where people maybe want to make themselves look a little bit better at the expense of someone else who's not maybe part of their friend circle. And you know, I can definitely get it. You know, I've probably said a few things that weren't read the way that I intended them to be. And, you know, I would never try to say that all those groups are negative, because they really do help a lot of people. Some people, that's their only resource. They don't have piercers in their area where they can go and shadow. They don't have the means to go to an educational conference. So the forums are what they get. Mostly what I just don't like to see are piercers kind of, you know, dumping on someone else for just making common mistakes. And, you know, I feel like if anyone is trying to learn and trying to make themselves better, you shouldn't really try to get negative on them. I mean, criticism has its place, but, you know, really putting people down when they're trying to learn, you know, I'm not crazy about that.
Right. But I've noticed that the tone of discourse has actually improved quite a bit in the past 6 months or so. Over the course of the life of these forums, and I've been on internet piercing forums since the 90s. There was one called rec.arts.bodyart back then, and I was on that one that I'd get on through an AOL connection. They've gone through very, very friendly eras and very, very divisive, angry eras, and people get more out of the friendly eras. Like, really, if the point is that we'd all like to elevate the quality of our industry, it does seem to benefit people to really consider the quality of the discourse and be considered that if you're a jerk on the internet 6 years ago, that might pop up again. And do you really? do you really want to feel like, wow, I was a jerk that day? Like, it's happened to me. I've seen stuff that I've written. I was like, man, that could have been phrased better. Or man, I must have been having a bad day and took it out on this other person, which is
yeah,
cool.
I've had the same situation. I remember, a lot of my formative years were on BME.
Mm-hmm.
And the forums there, I would say something maybe quick, or, another thing is sometimes piercers have that weird kind of schedule where you only have 5 minutes to talk, and then you have to go back to work for a couple of hours, and then you might say something like pretty short with somebody. But, whenever you're going to type out something and hit send, before you do that, maybe try to think about how someone's going to read it, and, would you say that out loud to someone's face? Would it come off rude, or would it come off as insensitive? And not saying you have to coddle people, but basically, when you're talking to a peer, whether they're above, below, same skill level as you, just try to respect the fact that they're trying to learn, basically.
Sure, and also the quote unquote famous piercers of today won't be that in 5 years. It'll be a different group, right? And those people are going to definitely hold some grudges if they felt like they were mistreated at the time. I know it took me a while to get over. There was a tribalectic forum, and it took me a while to get over some of this discussions that happened in the tribalectic forum. One of the things that I was hoping to talk about with this discussion too, Ryan, is something I've noticed, a bit of a hive mind, where only one point of view is tolerated.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely seen that.
Which I actually think is counterproductive to learning. I think if there's just one point of view, and I'm going to give an example of just like, stainless steel is a bad piercing material, right? And I'm not, I don't want to get into the merits of that argument, but more so if that's the only discussion that's had and anybody is marginalized that holds a contrarian opinion, it doesn't actually benefit our industry. It's a lot more. It's a lot better to actually have that discussion and see where the science is behind arguments like that, and where the information is coming from. All of that. And if somebody finds themselves just repeating what they've heard over and over and over again, I'd encourage people to indulge in contrarian opinions.
That's actually one of my absolute favorite ways to learn, is just by debating with someone. Sometimes I really like to play devil's advocate just so I can get the maximum amount of passion out of them for them to defend their point of view. So in a situation like that, I might say like, oh, well, I think stainless steel is the best. If someone's going to be like, oh, no, it's the worst, because I want to hear their argument. And, maybe they'll change my mind, or maybe, we can learn some new information and we can both learn together. But I definitely do see it as a downside when you go into a group and you have one experienced piercer saying, okay, this is my opinion. And then you have everybody else who follows on that thread saying, oh, yeah, didn't you read this person's opinion? That's gospel. That's exactly the way. And then they kind of extend that out into their career, other people that they interact with. And then maybe, there's not a lot of merit to the argument to begin with. So I definitely think it's important to not always debate, but at least discuss it. And I don't think enough piercers put a focus on why we do things. I think they focus on, okay, we have to do this because I saw someone or I heard someone talking about doing this, but they don't understand really, like, is that really applicable to our industry? Is that something that's really necessary? Is that a minimum standard or above minimum standard? I think they just kind of stop asking questions and they try to just kind of follow the group.
Right. And I've had it come back to me even where people are like, but you said, it's just like, well, right, and that's one of the downsides of the internet too, is that it's a permanent time capsule. This thing that I said in 2012, I may have since learned and grown and just never had the opportunity to discuss it again. So following what I said once on a forum doesn't necessarily help you.
Yeah, I always like to kind of evolve my thinking, because 10 years ago, if I had been talking to someone about aftercare, and this is actually a kind of a side note, is, the other day, brings it up that I was piercing a client that I pierced for years. But I haven't pierced them in maybe 5 years, and I gave them my new aftercare packet, and they're like, oh, you're recommending this now, but before you were saying to use this or to do this, and now you're saying to not do that. And I was like, well, yeah, at the time that, my suggestions were based on the best information available, and, now that's evolved. So, I've updated this. So, kind of start fresh with this information. I feel like that's kind of turning into sort of a lost art form with this industry. A lot of people, they just look at someone else's doing and they say, okay, I have to do that if I want to be a successful piercer, or if I want someone to treat me seriously, I have to carry these exact same jewelry companies. I have to use these exact same gloves. I have to use this exact same anything. Rather than going out there and learning why it is that piercer chose those things.
Right. Well, originally, for me, I think one of the big things was developing a contrarian opinion. And at the time, it was a skin prep opinion, but I was in the vast minority. And it really benefited me to go out and get a lot of information, where I feel like I can have that discussion actually with a really open mind nowadays, that at the time was kind of shut down by the hive mind. It was like, this is what's done, why are you asking questions?
Yeah. That can definitely be a negative, because when you look at things like I think I know kind of what you're talking about with certain products. If there's a certain product that was kind of industry standard and then it wasn't available on the market, so people were moving towards other things. And then, people would start saying like, oh, well, let's just find a copycat product instead of, looking at other products, and, changing that conversation into, well, why do you have to use that exact same thing? Why can't you look at these other things that are used for, medical applications or other skin preps, and you can see that they're time tested, they work very well. Why are you just holding up something because someone else mentioned it? It's important to have the conversation of why we do what we do, rather than just saying, do what I do.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I genuinely, I think I get a lot more from when somebody can explain in detail why they are doing a certain thing versus I'm just do it this way. At the Fakir School, there's a really interesting discussion about hard surface disinfectants. And if you can think of a drier subject, I challenge you. But the interesting discussion isn't like, oh, hey, use chemical X and there you go. That's problem solved. And I think that's what a lot of education in the piercing industry is. It's just like, hey, just use this, end of discussion, moving on, right? In contrast, at the Fakir class, the discussion isn't about that. The discussion is, here's all the different types of hard surface disinfectants. This is the way they work. This is reasons you might choose one over the other. And at the end of the lesson, you have a list of about 5 or 6 chemicals that you kind of have to go home and decide for yourself about. And I think that's a really wonderful way to learn that particular subject, because you can apply it to a lot of different other things.
That's one of my favorite ways to learn, actually. I remember there were points in the industry where you couldn't just flip open a catalog and say, like, okay, I'm going to use this as my skin cleanser, I'm going to use this as my hard surface disinfectant, I'm going to use this for all these other products, where you really had to break down a list and say, all right, this is everything that's available. I don't know anything about it, so I'm going to research these chemicals, I'm going to research the kill times, I'm going to research the cost, and I'm going to find out what would work best for my studio and my application. And I think that's a fantastic way to learn, and I wish more people would kind of have that mentality.
Yeah, I'll say it's actually very challenging to teach that way, because you have to be very, very knowledgeable about a whole lot of the subject. But I don't give that lecture, but I'm always thrilled to receive that lecture. Considering it's a dry subject, I kind of love that.
Well, I think some of the best instructors, their real talent is taking a boring subject and making it tolerable, basically.
For sure.
So that kind of brings us to the end of this one. My name is Ryan Willett. You can find me online at precisionbodyarts.com. And where can they find you online, John?
Best place is www.piercingnerd.com.
All right. Thanks for joining me, and we'll be back with another Piercing Wizard podcast soon.